Too weary to stand at a lonely train station, she thought no one would come to her rescue until a rugged cowboy appeared and carried her away, changing everything in her life. The train screeched to a halt, and the young woman stepped down onto the dusty platform, her legs trembling and her body heavy from the long journey she had traveled for days, leaving behind the familiar warmth of home and the comforting faces of family carrying only a small trunk and the fragile hope of a new beginning. The station was busy with travelers moving quickly in all directions, their voices blending into a constant hum that made her head spin. The wind whipped through the open space, tugging at her shawl and her hair, and she hugged herself tightly, trying to preserve what little warmth she had, left her muscles ached, and every step felt like climbing a mountain. She took a deep breath and tried to steady herself, feeling the weight of exhaustion pressing down from her shoulders to her feet. Each moment of anticipation and anxiety mingled with the physical pain of travel, until finally she faltered, her knees giving way and her trunk slipping slightly from her grasp. She collapsed onto the hard wooden platform, the rough boards pressing into her skirt, and the chill seeping through her thin shoes making her shiver. She lay there for a moment, catching her breath, her chest rising and falling rapidly, her hands trembling as she clutched the trunk like it was a lifeline. The crowd moved past her, some glancing briefly, while others ignored her completely, and a sharp pang of loneliness cut through her heart. She had imagined this arrival differently, with someone there to greet her, to guide her to warmth and food. Instead, she was met with indifference and the harsh reality of being alone in a foreign place. The sun shone weakly through the morning sky, casting long shadows that stretched across the platform, and the sounds of the town beyond the station seemed distant and unwelcoming. She tried to sit up, but her limbs refused to cooperate. The fatigue of the journey and the burden of uncertainty pinned her to the boards. She closed her eyes, for a moment trying to summon courage to rise again, to move forward, to find a way out of the vulnerability that enveloped her. In that instant, she realized how fragile her own strength could feel and how quickly the body and spirit could be pushed to their limits. Yet, beneath the fear and weariness, a flicker of determination remained. She reminded herself of the journey she had endured, the obstacles she had overcome, and the courage it had taken to leave home and face an unknown future. She drew in a deep, shaky breath, feeling the crisp morning air fill her lungs, and willed herself to stay conscious, to stay alert, to notice anything or anyone who might offer aid. The platform seemed endless and cold, yet she held on to the thought that help might come, that someone might notice her distress and step forward, that even in this moment of collapse, the possibility of rescue and care had not vanished entirely. She pressed herself slightly higher on the platform, leaning against her trunk, and felt a quiet resolve settle into her bones, a resolve to endure, to survive, and to face whatever would come next, with what strength she could summon. As her eyes scanned the crowd for any sign of hope, the world around her remained indifferent, yet she refused to surrender fully, and in that fragile space between exhaustion and expectation, she waited for the chance that her life might take a turn toward warmth and safety. The young woman remained on the platform, her body still aching from the fall, her hands clutching the small trunk as she tried to steady her breathing. The crowd continued to bustle past her, oblivious to her distress, their voices blending into a constant hum that seemed to press against her ears and make the wind feel colder. The chill seeped through her thin shoes and tugged at the edges of her shawl, making her shiver. She shifted slightly on the rough wooden boards, trying to find a more comfortable position, yet every movement reminded her of how heavy her body felt after the long journey and how little energy she had left. Her mind raced with worry about what she would do next, where she would go, and who she could possibly turn to for help. Each passing second seemed to stretch endlessly, the sun climbing slowly across the sky, casting sharp shadows that made the station feel both bright and unwelcoming. She tried to focus on the distant horizon, her eyes scanning for any sign of someone coming to assist her. Her heart leapt and sank, with each approaching figure unsure if they would stop or pass her by. Her thoughts drifted to the long journey she had endured, the hills, the plains, the trains and wagons that had carried her forward, leaving behind the comfort of home and the faces of those she loved. She had imagined a different arrival, a kind hand, a welcoming voice, warmth and food instead. She had met exhaustion, cold and indifference. The chill in the air seemed to mirror the fear gnawing in her chest. She hugged her trunk tighter, wishing for some reassurance, some sign that she was not entirely alone, and then she heard it, the faint rhythmic sound of hooves in the distance, a small stirring in her chest that mingled hope and anxiety. She squinted toward the horizon, trying to discern who or what it could be. Her pulse quickened. As the sound grew louder, each beat of the horse against the gravel seeming to echo the quickening of her own heart. She tried to stand, but her legs trembled still from the fall and the long hours of travel she pressed herself more firmly against the wooden boards, trying to maintain her composure while keeping her eyes fixed on the approaching figure. The wind tugged at her shawl and hair brushing across her face, and she brushed it aside, willing herself to remain alert and prepared to respond if someone came to help. The minutes stretched, as she waited, each second a test of patience and endurance. Yet beneath the exhaustion, a flicker of determination remained. She would not give in to despair. She would remain poised, ready to accept assistance if it arrived. And as the hooves grew closer, carrying the promise of change, a quiet hope settled in her chest that perhaps her ordeal was about to shift and that someone had come for her at last. The sound of hooves grew louder, and her heart pounded in her chest. The figure on horseback became clearer, a rugged cowboy riding steadily toward the station, his posture calm yet purposeful, and his expression showing strength and reassurance. She clutched her small trunk tighter and rose slightly from the crate, unsure whether to feel relief or lingering fear. The wind tugged at her shawl and blew strands of hair across her face, which she brushed aside, trying to steady herself as he dismounted with ease, his boots crunching. On the gravel, the sunlight glinting off his hat and belt, catching her attention, making the moment feel suspended in time. He approached slowly, tipping his hat slightly and speaking in a low, calm voice, introducing himself and explaining why he had come, a promise kept on behalf of her family, or a mutual acquaintance reassuring her that she was no longer alone. She exhaled shakily, feeling the tension that had pressed on her all morning begin to ease, and a small flicker of hope stirred. Within her, the cowboy extended a hand or offered a gentle gesture to help her onto the horse. She hesitated briefly, weighing trust and fear, yet the warmth and steadiness in his eyes encouraged her to step closer. Each movement toward him felt like leaving behind the weight of exhaustion and vulnerability. She stepped forward, allowing him to assist her, the distant noise of the station fading behind them, the horse shifting beneath her, and the cowboy helping with her trunk. A quiet connection began to form between them, a bridge over the isolation that had burdened her for hours. The rhythmic motion of the horse, as they began to ride along the dusty path, mirrored the easing of her heartbeat, and the soft sounds of the town fading into the distance carried a sense of calm and security. A new chapter quietly beginning under the open sky, the stars beginning to emerge above them, and the promise of warmth, safety, and companionship waiting at the ranch ahead, settling gently over her as hope and trust began to grow. The ride from the station carried them through quiet fields dusted with frost, the cold air nipping at her cheeks, yet the warmth of the cowboy's presence beside her made the journey feel less harsh, each clop of hooves against the ground, a steady rhythm echoing in her chest, a subtle reassurance that she was not alone. She stole nervous glances at him, unsure how to speak first. Yet his calm posture and steady gaze encouraged her to relax. The faint glow of lanterns from distant farmhouses lit their path, and the occasional rustle of animals in the brush reminded her that she was entering a world both unfamiliar and strangely comforting. The cowboy spoke softly, recounting simple stories of the land and the ranch. His voice even and steady, and she listened intently, absorbing the normalcy and kindness it conveyed with each word. The fear and despair she had carried on the platform began to melt away, leaving room for curiosity and hope. The crisp air carried the scent of pine and fresh earth, and for a fleeting moment, the loneliness that had weighed so heavily seemed far behind. She realized that he had come not out of obligation, but out of quiet honor and care. A warmth no fire could match. Her heart lifted slightly. As the ranch appeared in the distance, its windows glowing softly through frost-laced panes, the scent of wood smoke drifting toward them, bringing a comforting promise of shelter. The cowboy dismounted, first offering a steady hand to help her down, and assisting with her trunk. The physical support mirrored the reassurance he had provided emotionally, and they crossed the threshold into the cozy interior together, the warmth of the fire and the inviting smell of bread and stew wrapped around her, and for the first time she felt safe and seen. The evening that had begun with fear and weakness transformed into a night filled with quiet hope, connection, and the gentle promise of belonging. A new chapter, quietly beginning under the glow of the ranch's welcoming hearth. Inside the warm ranch, the young woman set down her trunk and felt the tension of the morning slowly fade. The fire crackled softly, and the smell of fresh bread and stew filled the air, offering a comforting embrace. She took a deep breath and allowed herself to feel relief and gratitude. The cowboy moved beside her with calm assurance, his presence steady and kind, offering gestures of help and guidance that made her feel safe and valued for the first time. In days, they shared a simple meal together, soft conversation and quiet laughter filling the space between them, each word and glance weaving a fragile connection that eased the memory of exhaustion and fear. The snow fell gently outside, blanketing the world in silence and stillness. She sipped warm tea and felt the warmth of the room, and the man beside her filled the emptiness she had carried for so long. The small acts of care, patience, and kindness built trust, and slowly a sense of belonging took root. She began to imagine a future on the ranch, a life where she could be safe, valued, and perhaps even loved. The fear that had weighed on her heart gave way to hope and anticipation, and she allowed herself to feel excitement for the days ahead. The cowboy's steady presence reassured her that she was no longer alone, and the quiet certainty that this Christmas Eve marked the beginning of a new chapter settled gently around her, filling the house with warmth, care, and the promise of connection, companionship.